Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the gold-trimmed, scandal-soaked halls of Versailles, where love is rarely just love, silk hides daggers, and secrets never stay secret for long. You're about to dive into a story so tangled in politics, lust, and powder deception that you might not survive it emotionally. Before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe if you enjoy this journey. Drop your city and the time where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this history campfire reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's ease into this tale together. It begins with a breathtaking view. You arrive at the Château de Versailles, sprawling like a gilded fever dream under the summer sun. The air hits you first, roses and sweat, candle wax, and stale ambition. Marble floors stretch endlessly beneath your slippers. Above, ceiling frescoes of gods and battles pretend the chaos below doesn't exist. Every corridor echoes with hushed secrets and the clack of shoes racing to outrun the truth. You're nobody here, just another ruffle in the crowd, which is perfect. It means you can listen, observe, and breathe in the drama without getting poisoned, at least not publicly. Louis XV is still king, though his golden boy reputation has tarnished. Once Louis the Well-Beloved, now he's the monarch of malaise, weighed down by gout, rumors, and a country whispering more about bread than ballet. At 60, he's less interested in ruling and more in personal amusements. The court feels brittle. Nobles cling to favor like drowning men to driftwood. Ministers bicker, and behind one lavish set of curtains, something new stirs. It's the quiet construction of a little house, tucked behind hedges within royal grounds. You might mistake it for a folly or greenhouse, something harmless. But no, it's far more dangerous. The Parc-aux-Cerfs or Deer Park. The only hunting here is social, and the prey are young women. The king's mistresses, kept in rotation, out of sight but not out of mind. You sneak past servants carrying trays of figs and candied rose petals. Down a side hall, you glimpse a girl, maybe 15, being dressed by attendants. Her eyes are wide, her mouth firm. She's entering a world where rules don't apply unless the king invents them. Versailles smiles, but it devours. Historically, Louis XV had a parade of lovers, some noble, many not. What's unusual now is how institutionalized it's become. The king's right-hand man arranges these affairs like hiring court musicians, with a woman on salary to prepare the girls. It's creepy yet oddly bureaucratic, and it doesn't cause scandal, until a woman arrives who refuses to stay behind the curtain. Enter Jeanne Bécu. You haven't met her properly yet, but you will. She's not from this silk-draped world, not from powdered bloodlines or ancient names. She's the illegitimate daughter of a cook, raised in a convent, later an apprentice in a wig shop. She's climbed Paris's social scene with charm, wit, and just enough shamelessness to survive. Now, whether she realizes it or not, she's walking into the center of power. You pass a mirror and catch a reflection, realizing how easy it is to lose yourself here. Versailles pulls you into roles. Courtiers rehearse theirs, desperate to maintain them. You find a spot near the Hall of Mirrors, where the king sometimes walks. They say he still stops to admire his face, though wrinkles are winning. Does he see a monarch, a god, or a tired man hiding from the weight of empire? In a corner, a poet recites lines about virtue, the irony almost choking you. Nearby, ladies fan themselves while casually shredding a rival's reputation. She wore last season's lace. One whispers, as if it's a crime against humanity. You smile, but your ears stay sharp. The real news isn't published, it's whispered. Tonight, those whispers turn toward a certain mistress-to-be. They don't know her name yet, but they've seen the king's glances and his minister's smirks. Another one, someone mutters, as if Madame de Pompadour's ghost isn't watching. Pompadour, the king's former mistress, was a political force, choosing ministers, editing plays, running France in lace sleeves. Her death left a vacuum, and the king's trying to fill it with beauty, not brains. Outside, the gardens stretch like an endless painting. Fountains sparkle, statues of gods and heroes pretend to be eternal. But the people here are replaceable, especially the women. Fun fact, the Parc-aux-Cerfs had code names for its mistresses. Louis used nicknames like Mademoiselle de Romans or Belle Louise in documents. Bureaucracy meets brothel, and nobody flinches. Back inside, a court musician plays a lullaby on a viol, lulling you not to sleep but to awareness. The storm hasn't started, but the wind is changing, and Versailles always knows first. There's endless debate about whether Louis XV was a libertine gone mad or just a king escaping boredom in the only way his world allowed. Was he a predator, a product, or a man suffocating under a crown too heavy for one person? Scholars still argue, but one thing is certain. Jeanne Bécu, soon to be Madame du Barry, will turn this golden kingdom on its lace-trimmed head. You find him just before dusk in a garden so perfect it feels fake. Hedges cut with geometric obsession, gravel paths swept to precision, roses bred to unnatural bloom. Louis XV, the Sun King's heir, sits like a candle flickering in a drafty palace. Older than you expected, his cheeks sag with years and indulgence, his wig too heavily powdered. His eyes, once vibrant in portraits, drift toward nothing. He doesn't see you. You're just a shadow, but you see everything. The way he sighs into his wine glass, his fingers twitching like they're tired of quills and crave something softer. The silence around him is thick, expectant, as if even the birds know not to interrupt. It wasn't always this way. When Louis was young, France adored him, calling him the well-beloved. Handsome, gallant, a fairy tale prince, he ascended the throne at 5 and ruled from 15, with hopes he'd rival Louis XIV. But decades slide past. Costly wars like the 7 Years' War gutted France's treasury and reputation. Colonies lost, allies betrayed, enemies emboldened. Louis made bad calls, trusted the wrong people, and his idolized image eroded. By now, France respects him like a tired uncle at a reunion, out of habit. So, he retreats to women, art, and extravagant bedsheets. Versailles becomes a stage for pleasure and evasion, while Paris starves and questions, and the court dances to century-old jokes. You feel the disconnect, like a crack in stained glass. Louis isn't alone. A man approaches, tall, powdered, a veteran libertine. The Duc de Richelieu, the king's confidant. His face is a roadmap of indulgence. Richelieu murmurs about a new diversion, and Louis's eyebrow twitches. He's listening. You trail them down an ivy-covered path as they discuss politics like a broken clock, regretful, but unmotivated to fix it. Then Richelieu mentions her. She's different, he says, smiling. Not just beautiful. Down a narrow corridor, a tutor whispers to a priest, his voice tight with disdain. It's a spiritual danger, he insists. The king is letting sin into the sanctuary. You don't need to ask who he means. Then there's the Bishop Christophe de Beaumont, Archbishop of Paris, a man who hasn't smiled since Louis XIV's death and wouldn't even if heaven descended into the chapel. He's a rock blocking Jeanne's ascent, immovable and loud. The first public clash happens during a routine Sunday in Massachusetts. Jeanne, dressed as modestly as someone with a tiara can manage, enters the royal chapel with grace, ready to take communion like any good Catholic. But the priest hesitates, then refuses. The silence is heavy, absolute. Not even the page boys blink. Jeanne lowers her eyes, hands folded, but it's a calculated stillness. She's not humiliated. She's storing the moment like flint waiting to strike. Louis hears about it within the hour, and his displeasure ripples through the palace like a dropped wine glass. The court devours the gossip. She tried to take communion. They gasp, as if she tried to burn the altar with a smirk. A woman like that, how dare she? Never mind that half the congregation cheats on their spouses or poisons rivals with arsenic-laced tea. Jeanne's crime is existing where they can see her. The real tension isn't about religion or etiquette, it's about position. Versailles is built on the illusion of divine order, rank passed through blood, not charm. Jeanne is a glitch in the system. She doesn't belong. Not in the pews, not in the portraits, certainly not beside the king. Later that evening, you follow her to one of her private salons, a space growing popular among the younger nobility. Here, people laugh freely, rules bend, and conversation flows without sounding like it passed through 3 translators. Jeanne listens more than she speaks, but when she does, she's clever, a touch wicked, and always watching. She notes who laughs too loudly, who feigns support while plotting her exile. She's new to this world, but not blind. Surprisingly, her gatherings attract minor dukes, obscure artists, even the occasional philosopher. She funds a young playwright whose last work was banned, commissions portraits of her ladies-in-waiting to elevate their status, and adopts a boy named Zamor, a slave gifted from the colonies, dressing him in velvet. It's bizarre, uncomfortable, and quintessentially Versailles. A pamphlet circulates the salons, passed like contraband among giggling girls. It's a crude cartoon of Jeanne atop a throne of wine bottles and powdered wigs, skirts lifted, the king kneeling like a lovesick fool. Laughter spreads like a disease. Jeanne, when it reaches her, studies it calmly and smiles. "The artist didn't capture my nose quite right," she says dryly, moving on. She doesn't fight scandal. She absorbs it, wears it like a fur stole, and keeps walking. Here's a strange fact. Rumors swirled that Jeanne had a mirror room in her apartments, walls and ceiling lined with mirrors where she practiced expressions and gestures, watching herself from every angle. Half fashion myth, half court obsession, it's completely believable. In a world where image is survival, Jeanne knew reflection was a weapon. In the king's study, late at night, Louis scribbles in a journal no one will read, sighing as if the air weighs too much. He's exhausted, not just by politics, but by the effort of pretending he enjoys being king. When Jeanne enters, he brightens, not with lust, but relief, as if she's the only one not asking for something he can't give. They speak quietly about a new opera, a duchess's hideous hairdo, then fall into a warm silence. She sits beside him, not touching, just present. It's enough. The clergy isn't done. The archbishop's defiance sparks debate. Should the king be seen with a woman barred from sacraments? Should France's moral compass bend for a mistress? Pamphlets explode, some defending her, others venomous. Historians still question whether the church's outrage was sincere or a calculated jab at an indulgent king. Many clerics had their own hidden mistresses and bastards, making their moral posturing suspect. Jeanne became the symbol, the scapegoat, the battle line drawn in powdered chalk. She knows what's happening and doesn't flinch. Every rumor, cartoon, and block communion proves she's no longer just a scandal. She's a force. It begins with a necklace. Not the infamous one yet, but a modest string of pink pearls with teardrop earrings, presented in a velvet box so soft it practically purrs. Jeanne runs her fingers over it, glancing at the servant with a raised eyebrow. "No note?" she asks, already knowing it's from Louis. The king's taste is unmistakable, expensive, sentimental, slightly dated. She wears it to breakfast, and half the court chokes on their wine. The pearls match the king's sash, a glittering announcement. She's not just in his favor, she's his. By lunch, the news is spread through every hallway. The mistress has arrived. Now comes the pageantry. Versailles doesn't do subtle. Jeanne's elevation demands symbols, jewels, titles, a retinue of attendants, all slightly ridiculous in their formality. There's talk of remodeling a palace wing for her, with her own entrance and apartments. Courtiers pretend to gag, but none miss a step in the parade. They may despise her, but they bow when a new sun rises. Louis walks lighter, like he shed a heavy coat. You see it during their strolls, her hand on his arm, her laugh rising above the fountains. He doesn't just admire her. He needs her, not just as a lover, but as a shield against his creeping irrelevance. France frowns, but Jeanne beams, orbiting the throne like a moon sculpted from rouge and daring. The gifts escalate. A diamond-studded bracelet, a fan painted with mythological scenes where the goddess has Jeanne's eyes, a carriage in deep green velvet with gold trim and billowing silk curtains. She looks less like a mistress and more like a queen in exile. The aristocracy's hatred sharpens. To them, her presence is an insult, proof that status can be bought, not just inherited. A countess hisses to her maid, "She'll be in the king's will next. Mark my words." The anxiety is real. Jeanne doesn't play by their rules and doesn't care that they're offended. She's collecting influence, and that burns. At her jeweler's, one of Paris's finest, she requests an inventory of new pieces with the ease of someone selecting grapes. "Something that speaks," she says. The jeweler doesn't ask what it should say. He just opens another drawer. Then comes her formal presentation to the court, a ceremony wrapped in silk and side-eye, dressed in white and gold, embroidered so heavily she moves like a sculpture. Jeanne walks the gilded aisle. Louis watches, his gaze a mix of pride and possession. Courtiers shift uncomfortably, required to acknowledge her. Their bows are deep but insincere. She knows it. She smiles. Here's a quirky sidebar. Louis reportedly had a mistress staircase built, an unmarked stairwell connecting his private rooms to his mistress's velvet line for Jeanne. An express route from scandal to sanctuary. In her apartments, she hosts visitors, not the powerful, but enough to make the walls echo with conversation. She listens, speaks sparingly, and watches everything, her stillness strategic. Scholars debate her power. Was she a mere ornament, or did she influence appointments and control access? Records show names rising and falling based on her favor. That's not decoration, that's control. Later, by her window, she rests a hand on the pink pearl necklace, still wearing it despite diamonds in the next room. Maybe it's nostalgia, a reminder of how fast things change, or a warning to herself. Don't fall for the trappings. They can be taken as quickly as they're given. Versailles. At one of Jeanne du Barry's masked balls, wine flows like divine revelation. She knows what she's doing, offering the nobility distraction, which, when wielded well, becomes domination. You find yourself in Versailles' smaller ballroom, a vision of excess. The chandelier, doubled in size for the occasion, glitters overhead. Everyone's in costume, shepherds, gods, but none dare dress as royalty except the actual royals. Jeanne enters late, wearing a black domino mask and a gown so dazzling it's as if the Milky Way collapsed onto her shoulders. The crowd parts like a sea of powdered wigs. She moves silently, her fan flicking with military precision, touching no one, yet leaving everyone stirred. The king arrives soon after, masked but unmistakable, kissing her hand before stepping back to let her shine. Here's your odd fact. Jeanne adored puppets, funding marionette theaters, and once hosting a shadow play that thinly veiled the courtiers' real dramas. Nobody knew whether to laugh or choke. Around midnight, a whisper spreads, a new guest uninvited. Louise Marie de Bourbon, an illegitimate daughter of Louis XIV, stands glaring at Jeanne like a cat sizing up a bird. She doesn't curtsy or speak, just stares until the king awkwardly nods her way. Jeanne steps forward, hand extended. "Madam, your mask is exquisite." It's an olive branch laced with acid. The court nearly faints. In these social battlegrounds, smiles and silk are weapons, but the wounds are real. Jeanne doesn't need to win them over. She just keeps them off balance. Her portrait is unveiled the next week. Rosy cheeks, gentle eyes, hair powdered to cloud-like perfection. Its soft power made visible, displayed prominently by the king. Visitors stare. Some pretend not to see. Others can't look away, claiming it's too flattering, mere propaganda. That's the point. Jeanne smiles, but her guard is up. Her enemies sharpen, her support shallow. Even Louis's daughters, Madame Victoire and Madame Sophie, call her La Fille, the girl with barely veiled contempt. Yet Jeanne rises, investing in charities, opening an orphanage, funding artists and composers. It's Pompadour's playbook with a twist, less enlightenment, more glitter. The people notice. Not everyone hates her, especially those receiving her coin. Historians debate whether this phase was strategic or instinctive. Was she proving her worth or savoring the moment? Some say she was coached. Others insist she played chess in a room full of checkers. As her portrait is covered for the night, silk draped over her painted face like a royal shroud, you wonder what she's thinking upstairs, feeding her pugs, rereading a letter, or staring in her mirror, pondering if the framed version of her will outlast the one in the glass. Portraits don't blink, age, or fall from favor, and Versailles only remembers what hangs on its walls. The morning smells of roses and blood, typical for Versailles when honor's been publicly insulted. A duel erupts over Jeanne, not the first nor the last. In the palace garden, two men lunge like overdressed wasps, wigs tied back, faces taut with rage. Their seconds stand bored, as if refereeing a tennis match. The cause, a careless insult at a card table. The Comtesse may play mistress, but never queen. A friend of Jeanne's heard it, gloves were thrown, and now they're stabbing at each other in the delicate sunrise. Jeanne, likely asleep, doesn't blink when told. "Did either die?" she asks, yawning. "No." "Then bring chocolate with cinnamon and a spoonful of scandal." The court buzzes, not because duels are rare, but because Jeanne inspires devotion that draws blood. Her defender, wounded in the shoulder, receives her violet-scented note and a ribbon from her gown. He keeps it until his death. The story shifts with each teller. Some say it was over a love letter, others that someone called Jeanne Pompadour's ghost in a low-cut gown. The myth sticks, a woman so powerful she ruins reputations without lifting a finger. Upstairs, Jeanne holds court, brushing a dog while a playwright recites unfinished verse. Her rooms smell of bergamot and old wood, walls lined with pale green and ivory silk, windows cracked to let in honeysuckle and bruised egos. When told of the duel, she says, loud enough to be overheard, "Tell the Comte, next time, aim higher." Everyone laughs, even those who shouldn't. Her danger lies not in beauty or the king's favor, but in bending perception, making everyone feel in on the joke, even when they're the punchline. A marquis's pamphlet accuses her of using pagan oils and illegal astrologers to seduce the court. Ironic, given his wife's own oils. The palace guards confiscate copies, but not before they're read aloud in salons, laughed at, and believed. Here's your fringe fact. An Italian palm reader reportedly told Jeanne she'd die beneath a blade. She laughed and tipped generously, but you? In a tucked-away garden behind Versailles East Wing, far from the grandeur of the orangery or the drama of the Grand Canal, Jeanne Bécu walks alone. The paths are crooked, hedges slightly overgrown, as if the garden prefers to stay unnoticed. The air is thick with jasmine and gravel crunches under her heels. She moves slowly, watching a bee weave through a rose bush. No entourage today. No giggling ladies-in-waiting, no ribbon lapdogs, no artists chasing commissions. Just Jeanne and the garden, both past their prime but stubbornly alive. Versailles blooms around her, spiteful in its vibrancy. The court is full again, salons crowded, balls loud. The queen, Marie Lesksinska, hosts nightly events, draped in pastel gowns and forced cheer, offering macarons and music like currency. Whispers circulate about the king's failing health, dwindling funds, and Paris growing restless. But in this gilded cage, they pretend all is golden. Jeanne feels the shift. The roses lean closer, hedges gossip, birds sing as if recalling something ancient. She sits on a seashell-shaped stone bench, tracing its worn surface. You sit beside her in silence. She doesn't acknowledge you, but she knows you're there. "You can feel it, can't you?" she murmurs. It's all off. The rhythm of Versailles is fractured. Servants glance over their shoulders, guards fidget, ministers stammer when the queen enters, laughter sounds rehearsed. Everything looks perfect, but everything is wrong. Jeanne's invitations dwindle. Her name is whispered only when she's out of earshot. She's no longer the center of attention, just an echo of a scandal the court wants to forget, a chapter they claim to have closed but secretly reread. The new courtiers, raised in Pompadour's shadow but bloomed under Jeanne's reign, have moved on. They sip wine and flirt under chandeliers, wearing colors she made fashionable, pretending they invented them. Yet not everyone abandons her. A young playwright she once supported sends a letter. "Without you, I'd still be scraping poems into cafe tabletops." She smiles, tucking it away like a relic. Here's your curious detail. Jeanne kept a garden journal, not for plants, but for people. Guests at her salons, musicians' performances, artist delays, overheard hallway comments. Her livre do, or sprouting book, smelled of lavender and ink, a planner, memory vault, and survival tool. Deeper in the garden, near a statue of Flora half hidden by ivy, Jeanne whispers something, prayer, insult, or both, and sits, legs crossed, as if waiting. The Duchesse de Gramont, a sharp-tongued rival, enters under the guise of a walk, her silver-gray dress and steely posture unmistakable. They exchange lemony greetings. "Lovely day," the Duchess says. "If you like the smell of overripe roses," Jeanne replies. They sit in tense silence until the Duchess speaks. "They're printing your name again, revolutionaries, calling you the queen of decadence, saying you bathe in milk while Paris starves." Jeanne retorts dryly, "I haven't bathed in milk since never." The Duchess smirks. "Doesn't matter." They believe it. Belief is louder than truth. They avoid politics, but the implication lingers. When the Duchess leaves, Jeanne holds a jasmine blossom, seeking answers in its petals. Weariness, not fear, weighs on her. She's not just a scandal now, but a symbol. Historians debate her awareness in these final Versailles years. Did she sense the coming storm? Some point to her reclusiveness, her refusal to entertain certain nobles, as evidence she saw it. Others believe she aimed for a graceful exit. But Jeanne doesn't fade, she recalculates. The garden becomes her refuge, free. Jeanne du Barry's name resurfaces in underground pamphlets, tied to the queen, the aristocracy, and the rod of the old regime. Though exiled from court for years and estranged from Marie Antoinette since Louis XV's death, history is rewriting her as a villain in real time. The first sign of danger arrives with a panting courier, boots caked in mud, delivering a letter sealed with red wax and a crude guillotine. Inside, a single line, "You lived off the people. Now the people will live off you." Jeanne folds it calmly, pours more coffee, and says nothing. Her staff is tense. Zamor, now taller and angrier, mutters about men lurking near the gate. "Should we leave?" he asks. "Where would we go?" She replies, "I've already been sent away once. I won't run again." But the silence grows too loud, the bird song too sharp. Her walks shorten, her veil abandoned, though eyes follow her in town. Shopkeepers offer stiff nods, their gazes darting to windows. Then comes the knocking. Not soldiers yet, just two men in plain clothes, badges like clubs from the Revolutionary Tribunal. They enter without bowing, demanding to search her villa. Jeanne, ever gracious, welcomes them. They rummage through drawers, books, letters, confiscating a painting of Louis XV as evidence of loyalty to tyranny, a bronze crucifix as royalist iconography, even noting a silver hairbrush. She offers tea. They decline. As they leave, one says, "You're not forgotten, madam." She smiles. How flattering. A week later, they return with a warrant. She's arrested for misuse of public funds, collusion with the monarchy, and corruption of national morality. Charges as theatrical as they are baseless. Justice in revolutionary France prioritizes spectacle over truth, and Jeanne is box office gold. She packs a single bag, a few dresses, one pearl earring, her garden journal, a velvet pouch of coins. To her staff, she says, "No need for all of us to burn." Zamor protests. She silences him with a look. "You've got your whole life to be angry. Don't waste it on ghosts." Stepping into a rusty government wagon, she glances back at Levassiennes. "I always said this place had too many mirrors." The journey to Paris is slow, watched by gawking peasants. Some recognize her, others guess. A boy throws a rock that hits the wheel, the guards laugh. At St. Pelagie prison, under gray skies, iron gates, and mildewed air, she's given a cot and a bowl. Initially, her name grants slight courtesy. Guards treat her like a curiosity, whispering the king's, but others are crueler, spitting in her water, smearing excrement on her cell door. She cleans it herself. Interrogations are relentless, probing for secret accounts or messages to Marie Antoinette. now fighting her own battles. Jeanne answers truthfully, but the questions aim to grind her down, not uncover facts. Here's a chilling detail. She records vivid dreams in her garden journal. One entry: a red ribbon floats in a basin. I reach for it. My hand comes back empty. She stops writing after that. Word spreads of her impending trial. A formality, a performance with a pre-written verdict. A sympathetic jailer slips her a mirror shard. She studies herself, saying, "Still here." Not a prayer, a statement. The revolution, hungry for blood, sees her as a perfect offering, not noble enough to mourn, not low enough to ignore, just scandalous enough to entertain. When summoned to the conciergerie, she requests perfume. The guard hesitates. She insists, "I want to smell like myself." She's let out in lilac and rose water, head high, hands bound, dressed in white, a plain chemise and cap, protocol for the condemned. "I always said I looked terrible in white," she mutters. No one laughs. At the conciergerie, the antechamber to death, the air is bruised, walls weeping. She shares a cell with two women, one old, one catatonic, speaking to neither, preserving herself. The trial is swift, 2 days of shouted accusations reducing her life to indulgences. A prosecutor reads from an old pamphlet, spitting sweets like a war crime. Jeanne defends herself calmly. "I never wore the necklace. I paid for my carriages. The sweets were for guests." It's futile. Her past is edited, her humanity erased. She's decadence incarnate, the king's poison. A juror whispers, "She smells like soap." Another retorts, "So did Marie Antoinette." No deliberation. She's guilty, sentenced to the guillotine the next morning. That night, she lies awake, tracing a lifetime of silk, lace, wigs, and wine. She recalls Louis's laugh, the garden at Louveciennes, her mother, her convent days, her first lie that edged her toward Versailles. No remorse. At dawn, a guard offers a red ribbon for her hair. "Subtle," she says. Given one request, she chooses perfume, orange blossom and jasmine, a blend from Masquerade when someone said she smelled like summer pretending to be spring. She dabs it behind her ears, at her throat, and hands it back for your wife. He's speechless. She's not. The tumbril, a rough card, awaits. She climbs in, white fabric flaring like spilled milk, ankles chained for balance. The streets hum with curiosity, not celebration. "The king's mistress," someone shouts. "Du Barry?" She looks older. Another. "She looks like us." That's the worst. They expected a monster, not a woman. Passing a flower stall, she says, "Tell the vendor her tulips are underpriced." The guard ignores her. At the scaffold, damp with morning fog, the executioner nods without ceremony, his hands calloused, eyes dull. She ascends, chains and age slowing her. Halfway up, she stumbles, saying to the executioner, "I beg your pardon." The crowd hears, and it becomes legend, outlasting her salons and diamonds. At the top, the blade gleams. She kneels, silent. The crowd leans forward, breathless. Then silence, then thunder. It's over. Her head is raised, but no one cheers. A strange hush falls. A child cries, confused. Someone drops their bread. Her perfume lingers. Here's a final flourish. Jeanne's body was buried in a mass grave, marked by a wooden post. Weeks later, some claim to smell orange blossom in the soil. Nonsense, but myths thrive on details. Paris moves on, the revolution devouring names, but forgetting Jeanne isn't easy. She becomes a cautionary tale. Don't dream too high. Look at Madame du Barry. Yet her name persists in graffiti, poems, tavern songs about the mistress of mirrors. Rumors claim she wept, kissed the executioner's hand, or told him to make it quick, darling. Robespierre's journal hints at her. The perfume of corruption outlasts its wearer. British papers feast, depicting her as a tragic commoner, a weeping statue, or dancing with death. A merchant sells du Barry perfume, orange blossom, musk, mystery, popular among women craving fallen glamour. Her villa at Louveciennes sits shuttered, overgrown. Children dare each other to sneak into its gardens, one claiming to see her brushing her hair under cherry trees. Records blur her from deeds, but not stories. The diamond necklace myth resurfaces, falsely tying her to royal plots or espionage. Scholars debate her: victim, villain, manipulator, or manipulated. She wasn't just a mistress or ornament. She mattered. A story Versailles didn't know it was telling until it ended in blood. Artists, musicians, and playwrights she supported remember her laughter, generosity, and stillness. A painter dreams of her poise. Another keeps her self-drawn sketch, a silhouette facing a window, light barely visible. Centuries later, her portrait resurfaces behind a false wall, cracked but smirking, hung in a dim Versailles hallway. Tourists pause, drawn to her uncategorizable presence. Not royalty, not nobility, just raw force in silk and jasmine. New historians challenge her vilification, suggesting she was a scapegoat for a hypocritical court. One essay, "The Woman Who Survived Her Own Myth," argues her persistence. Her refusal to fade was her real threat. At Louveciennes, renamed and resold, roses fail to bloom right, and locals whisper of a woman at dusk, waiting. In the 1900s, a perfume house accidentally recreates her scent, labeled Leffet du Barry, smelling of desire on the edge of ruin. Films portray her, silent, technicolor, feminist icon. None fully accurate, but they keep her alive. You stand in Versailles, centuries late, a witness among tourists. Her portrait dares you to underestimate her. You recall her first curtsy among enemies, her unmasked masquerade, her perfume on the scaffold. She wasn't supposed to become a myth, but she did, writing in the margins with lipstick and lace. A laundress's letter, written post-execution, captures her. They hated her, but she tipped me twice. They feared her because she laughed. Jeanne survived, not in monuments, but in stubborn memories, a ribbon, a scent, a name tasting of rebellion. You leave, her footsteps echoing in your mind, down paths she took as Comtesse, in exile, a scandal Versailles couldn't erase.